Welcome to IGLive, and lots of fun stuff happening today. But let me see if I can find out some good news to start off the IGLive. I've been thinking. Someone asked yesterday, what would be good side gigs now, and it's unfortunate. A lot of side gigs are a little bit harder during coronavirus. So I've been thinking about this. What would be good side gigs to start now? And let me just bring up my list of things. Oh, hold on one second. Oh yeah, so I saw some interesting news that one industry that's surging right now is one industry that's surging is drive-in movie theaters, because now you can go outside, you can go to the movies, and you can actually have social distancing at the same time. And if you're bringing your date, you can still fool around with your date in the car because you're social distancing from everyone else, and you could still watch movies. And I was doing a little research. Do you know when drive-in movie theaters first got popular was in the 1930s, because polio was the flu. So we still had these post-traumatic stress from the Spanish flu as a society, and polio was huge. So even the President of the United States in the 1930s had polio. So drive-in theaters started to become a big industry because people were social distancing while going to the movies to avoid polio and the flu. So for Ronnie, movie theaters might solve the problem there. You're saying, how do you get a blowjob and social distance at the same time? Again, take your date to a movie theater. At least you're social distancing from the other cars. But it's interesting to see how quarantining and social distancing created so many different industries and businesses. I mentioned earlier how, Shakespeare wrote King Lear while he was social distancing. Isaac Newton invented calculus while he was social distancing. Both of them were social distancing from the bubonic plague. In the U.S. right now, we're all social distancing, and we'll see what creative ventures come out of it. But it's interesting to note that this outdoor industry, drive-in movie theaters, started in the 1930s because of social distancing of polio and the flu and so on. So and now drive-in theaters are having a resurgence. Okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna show you the books I have on my bookshelf. So a lot of the books I have on my bookshelf are because of podcasts that I've done. But for instance, I'll show you some books. This book, It's Better Than It Looks, by Greg Easterbrook, Reason for Optimism in an Age of Fear. An excellent book to read right now when we're living in an age of fear. This book, one of the best written books ever. It got a lot of controversy when it came out. A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. And this, everyone said, oh, it's not really a novel, it's a biography. Whatever it is, whether it's biography, or no, it's not really a biography, it's a novel. Whether it's a biography or a novel, the writing style in this is among the best. Just by reading this book, you will become a better writer. A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. It's an interesting footnote about Old Man and the Sea. So I read this book. Of course, we all read it in high school, and it was boring as hell in high school. I don't even think I finished. It's only a thin little book. I don't even think I could finish it when I was in high school. It was boring. But I had sent Amazon a list of ideas about self-publishing. So they invited me out to this mini conference of self-publishers in Santa Monica, and we were all staying at Santa Monica Shutters, that hotel. And every room had a copy of Old Man and the Sea. I stole this from the Santa Monica Shutters. One thing that's really interesting about Old Man and the Sea is that if you check the FK score, the Fisher-Kincaid score, What that means is the Fisher-Kincaid score takes a piece of writing and analyzes what grade level that writing is. So if you wrote at a 12th grade level using 12th grade vocabulary, your FK score will be a 12. If you wrote at a first grade level or a Dr. Seuss level, your FK score might be a 0, like 0th grade. So Old Man and the Sea, somebody asked was the first book. It's Better Than It Looks by Greg Easterbrook. Then I had A Million Little Pieces by James Frey, and Ernest Hemingway, Old Man and the Sea. And so here's the interesting thing about Old Man and the Sea. Guess what the FK score is of Old Man and the Sea? This is the book that won Ernest Hemingway the Nobel Prize in Literature and catapulted him into Literary Hall of Fame. So the FK score of Old Man and the Sea is 4, which means this book is written at a 4th grade level. And what does this tell you? It doesn't mean this is a stupid book. It means that Ernest Hemingway was a great writer to get complicated concepts and themes and emotions written all at the 4th grade level so that anyone could read it and so that it was very simple to understand. And one time I had a CEO of a company I invested in, and he wrote a proposal and he sent it to me, and I checked the FK score. The FK score was an 18. And I wrote to him and I said, "You wrote this at an 18th grade level." And he wrote back and said, "Yeah, I'm smart, right?" And I'm like, "No, you're an idiot, because no one can understand anything you write. It's at an 18th grade level. It's like postgraduate school level." So again, Google FK score, because you could just cut and paste a piece of text in. I think when I put in Choose Yourself, it was like at a 5th grade level. Old Man and the Sea is at a 4th grade level. And this goes along with common sense. So there's a saying that if you can't explain something to someone, then you don't really understand the concept yourself. So you always have to have, if you want to be an expert in something, you're not an expert until you can explain at a 4th grade level to anyone. So Old Man and the Sea, one of the greatest books ever written. And again, this is one of those books, you will be a better writer just by reading this book, because you'll write in a more simple, emotional, minimalist fashion. And again, that's at an FK score of 4. The Fisher-Kincaid score is 4, meaning it's written at a 4th grade level. To find out, take a blog post you've written, Google FK score, F-K score. You'll find an FK calculator somewhere. Cut and paste your blog post into the FK score calculator. See if you're writing at a 4th grade level. Any writing that you publish should not be higher than a 6th grade level. If you want people to like your writing, don't try to prove. The worst writers are the people who are trying to prove how smart they are. If you want people to love your writing, write at a 6th grade level or below, which means at an FK score level or below. So what else? One of my favorite books about writing, he's went on my podcast to talk about it, Chuck Palahniuk's book, Consider This. Before this book came out, I thought Stephen King's book on writing was the best book I had ever read about writing. But Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club, his book, Consider This, is the best book on writing I've ever read, only to be equaled by The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. This is a must-read for any artist, writer, creative, whatever. It's about how every time you sit down to write or work on something artistic, you feel resistance. You feel everything from, I can't do this, I'm no good at this, I can't waste time on this is not going to make money, no one's going to like it, how am I going to get it published? The War of Art, reading this, it's a very simple book. It gets you through what Stephen Pressfield calls resistance, and it's very good. Just pulling books off my bookshelf randomly. Food by Jim Gaffigan. What I like about Jim Gaffigan, of course, is a world-famous stand-up comedian. It's funny, he performed at Stand Up New York, the comedy club I own, and Stand Up New York has 2 steps, or 1.5 steps to get to the stage. Jim Gaffigan fell on the steps and he fell on the floor of the stage. And the next day he was on Jimmy Kimmel, and he described the event, and he said, the one thing I'm supposed to do in stand-up comedy is stand up. And I couldn't even do that at Stand Up New York. So what I was going to say is what I like about Food, this book, and all of Jim Gaffigan's writing is almost every line is a punchline. Almost every sentence is a joke. If you watch Jim Gaffigan's stand-up specials, it's kind of amazing how there's a joke every sentence. That is so hard. If watch someone else's stand-up special, you will not, even Dave Chappelle, they don't have a joke every second. It's almost impossible to come up with a joke on every single line, and yet he does. For instance, he'll have some, I think this is here's a typical Jim Gaffigan joke. He'll say something like, I want you guys to know I'm up for a big role. And then he'll pause, and the audience will laugh or will clap, and then he says, "Yeah, it's a Cinnabon roll." And so again, one sentence, and it's almost like two jokes in the sentence. There was the pause where everybody clapped, and then there was the punchline where everybody laughed. And in food, it's a thick book, but almost every sentence is a joke. So other books, I've got. This is a little bit more controversial, particularly today, because Howard Stern's been in the news. But this is a collection of Howard Stern's interviews. It's just a transcript of interviews. And if you're going to be an interviewer, I don't care what you think about Howard Stern. The guy is the best interviewer on the planet. He will make you tell any secret possible, and you won't even realize you're saying it until you're saying it. And reading his interviews straight through, like one after the other, makes me a better interviewer. So just to summarize, these 3 books make me a better writer, or 4 books. Old Man and the Sea, just reading that will make you a better writer. A Million Little Pieces, which is the exact opposite style of Ernest Hemingway. Reading that will make you a better writer. Chuck Palahniuk's book, Consider This, such a great book on writing all these counterintuitive ideas that I never thought about. And then this will make you a better interviewer, reading Howard Stern's transcripts of interviews. And this will make you a better, at the very least, a better comedy writer. Food by Jim Gaffigan, or another great book by Jim Gaffigan is Dad is Fat. What else? What could I show you? How about I show you? Everybody shows books they read. I'll show books that I have not yet read. So here's a book I have not read. How to Invent Everything, a survival guide for the stranded time traveler. And I got that book because it always occurred to me, if I time travel back to, 100 BC, say, and I'm in the Roman Empire, I'm going to die. Like, I can't do anything. I don't even know. Like, there's a book by Mark Twain called A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And he describes this guy who, from the 1800s, travels back to King Arthur's Court and sets up an electric grid, a phone system, gunpowder, guns. I don't know how to make an electric grid. I don't know how to make, like, a phone system or guns. I can't even make a printing press. I can't even boil an egg hardly. Like, what would I do if I went? We always think we're so smart. Oh, I'm so smart. I'm in the 21st century. But if you actually went back like 2,000 years, what are you capable of doing? Like, okay, I could program a computer. Useless. I could invest in the stock market. That is useless back in 0 BC. I could probably go find Jesus somewhere, but I don't know how useful that's going to be either if I go back 2,000 years. So, let's see. Another book that I haven't read in this library, probably a book I should have read, The Doomsday Calculation by William Poundstone. I don't even know what it's about. Maybe it's about pandemics. And then here's something. I've always had a dream of being a piano player in a divey bar. The kind of person who, calls out requests and then just to kind of play the chords and play the song. I just want to be like a professional piano player in a bar. So I got this book. It's a fake book. It's called a fake book of every pop and rock song. And what it does is it just gives you like the chords and basic notes of every song. But I don't know how to you have to learn how to play the piano with a fake book, and I don't know how to do that. So I have to take lessons somehow in doing that. Maybe one day. So this is a book my wife got, which I haven't read yet, which is What Makes a Marriage Last by Phil Donahue and Marlo Thomas. If you're my age, you'll know Marlo Thomas from the show That Girl. She was great in it. And I don't know, that's the books of the day. Oh, speaking of Howard Stern, So Jackie Martling, remember Jackie the Joke Man who used to work on Howard Stern? You would think I was a big Howard Stern fan. I've listened to his show once in my life. But Jackie the Joke Man Martling, who used to work for Howard Stern and was on the show back in 2000, he sent me this book, Rationale of the Dirty Joke, an analysis of sexual humor. So he says you have to read this book, and I haven't read the book yet, so I guess I don't know how to tell dirty jokes appropriately. Jackie has tons of dirty jokes. So I'm going to put this in the stand. Ugh. I'm going to weightlifting my phone. And so that's my library of the day. Tomorrow I'll show you some more books that I have. But again, I think the FK score is an important technique, which if you're any kind of writer at all, and we all have to be writers, we all have to learn how to write better than we do. Me as well, me and everybody, we're always because so much of communication now is text-based, whether it's email, Twitter, Facebook, you write blogs, you write articles, you write books. We're all in a quest to learn how to be better writers. And it's amazing to me that The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway is written at a 4th grade level. And again, you could determine what grade level your writing is at. Just cut and paste your blog post into something called an FK score calculator, F-K, Fisher-Kincaid calculator, and it'll tell you what grade level your text is. Anything above 6, and you need to rewrite to make it better. And again, the concept is not only you want your book to be widely read, but if you can't explain something that's complicated in a very simple way, then you truly don't understand it. And so that's why it's so beautiful to see those concepts converge. The idea of teaching, if you can't teach something, then you don't understand it. And the idea of good writing equals a good FK score. So let's see. We passed over 1 million cases. This is all old news. I was really curious about what is the constitutional right. And I'm done protesting about the lockdown and economic shutdown. Everything's going to open when it opens. And again, like I said yesterday, once states start to open, there's going to be a rush because no state wants to be the worst economy in the world. So there's going to be a rush for every state to open. There's going to be a rush for businesses to open. And, I think there's going to be, I think the economy is going to look like crap for a few months. And then starting around August, September, you can't, there's a saying, don't fight the Fed. The Fed is putting up to $6 trillion in this economy. Where's that money going to go? It's got to get spent. Now, right now, it's just sitting in bank accounts because nobody's outside. But once the economy opens, people will spend the money. And so the economy is going to bounce back. It's not going to bounce back in any way comfortable for all of us. Like there's going to be a lot more automation. There's going to be robotics, drones, AI, big data. All of these areas are going to get bigger. There's going to be less, hopefully there'll be less spending on schools and colleges. By the way, I was thinking of something. So the other day, I gave a book challenge. And I'll just repeat the book challenge again because I have an idea for it. So the book challenge is pick a topic like habits or persuasion or negotiating or cooking, whatever you want. Go to a site like SSRN, SallyRuthNancy.com, search on persuasion. Thousands of academically researched articles will come up. If you don't go to SSRN.com, you can also try JSTOR.com. I didn't mention that site last week, but JSTOR.com also is a big database of academic papers. You search persuasion, and you'll see hundreds of articles, academic articles from like MIT, Stanford, all these universities about persuasion or habits or negotiation or cooking or whatever you want to write about. Take 30 of those papers, one a day. You're going to write a book, and it's a 30-day book challenge. Take 30 of those papers and then summarize the research they did in layman's terms. Remember, you're aiming for an FK score of 4 or 5. That academic paper, I guarantee you, will have an FK score of like 13 or 14. It'll be unreadable. And so you're going to describe in layman's terms the research they did and the conclusions they did. Then write about one example from your life where you applied this research, and find one example from history where a person used this research to develop a good habit in history. So it could be anything from like how to quit habits to quit cigarette smoking, to how to persuade a boss to give you a raise, or whatever. Write a 30-page book, a 60-page book, because it'll probably be 2 pages a chapter. Write a chapter a day. In 30 days, you have a book. You upload it to Amazon. You publish. You get your cover done on 99designs.com. So I described all of that last week, the 30-day book challenge. But I have an additional idea. Go to online course sites like teachable.com. Sign up to teach an online course. Anybody could sign up to teach an online course on a site like Teachable. Or I think Udemy also, and maybe Udacity. Sign up to teach an online course on Teachable, and here's what the course is. It's the book, and maybe do one more video, kind of with extra material. Describe another 20 studies. Do a couple of videos maybe, and now you have an online course about habits or negotiation or persuasion, and that's another vehicle to sell the book. So if you're making $500 a month from the book on Amazon, you can make another $500 to $1,000 a month on all these online education sites. Do that once a month, a new book every month with a new topic and using the same technique, and within a year, you'll have 12 books and courses out there, and you'll be making about, $12,000 to $20,000 a year, a month. I mean, so which is like $150,000 a year. So this is a good way to write small, simple books with very complex material that could actually help people, and it's another creating an online course that's just the book and then some videos. That's perfectly valid to do, and it's just as easy as writing the book to begin with. It's another vehicle for selling the book as well as selling it on Amazon, and it's making money while you sleep. Now, if you want ideas for book topics and book topics that you could research, for some reason here we go. I'm seeing all the comments. If you want ideas for book topics, I was looking at one author, and I don't know this guy, but this author I have a fun time looking at his page. There's an author named Patrick King. He doesn't know me. I don't know him. He'd probably think it's weird that I'm talking about him. But if you look at Patrick King's Google Amazon Patrick King. I'm going to do it right now. Amazon Patrick King. This guy does pretty sure he does what I just described. He writes he must write a book a month or more. And I think he's got over 100 books. I can't even tell how many books he's got. And then I know somebody told me he uses other names and his girlfriend also writes a book a month. So he's probably got for all I know, he's got 400 or 500 books out there. But here are some of his book titles. You don't have to write, spend years writing an academic, best-selling self-help book or novel, whatever. I'm sure he writes maybe he writes 3 or 4 books a month. Anyway, here's his last couple of book titles. Better Small Talk. Learn to Think Using Thought Experiments. The Art of Captivating Conversation. The Science of Getting Started. Stop People Pleasing. Think Like a Psychologist. Improve Your Conversations. Practical Intelligence. Improve Your People Skills. These are the titles of his books, and each one of them is probably selling a couple $100 worth a month. So now, if I were him, I would do a couple of videos for each book, and again, now set myself up on Teachable or Udemy or LinkedIn Learning or any of these online course sites that allow you to create courses. Well, the course now is your book and a couple of videos, and that's the course. And you'll be cheaper. A lot of courses on Teachable are, $100 to $200. You could just make your course cost the $10. You're just trying to sell your book, really. So again, you're just trying to create additional money, sources of revenue for your book. Amazon is only one source of revenue for your book. A course might be another source of revenue. And again, earlier last week I spoke about the spoken wheel approach. If you write a book about something, let's say you write a book about persuasion, or you write a book about negotiation, maybe you can also be a negotiating coach. And there are sites which hook up coaches to people who have need for their services. Like, let's say I'm about to go into a negotiation. I don't do this, but maybe I would think, how do I find a good negotiation coach? Now that could be another source of income, or giving a talk or whatever, giving a TEDx talk. Keeping hydrated. Oh, this tastes like bubbles in the water. water tastes weird. So, wanted to go through some of the news. I was saying earlier, is it constitutional what's happened? And again, not complaining about being, the social distance. I actually like the social distancing. No more handshakes, no more bro hugs, no more. Sometimes when I meet somebody from Europe, if it's a woman, do you kiss on one cheek? Do you kiss on both cheeks? I do not have to worry about that at all for the rest of my life. Thank you, social distancing. But one aspect I'm just curious about, no one's ever brought up what's going on constitutionally. Is this actually unconstitutional? And the 14th Amendment, which was the amendment right after the amendment that freed all the slaves, this amendment says, essentially, the government, no federal or state government can get in the way of your, life, liberty, or property. And I sort of feel like these lockdown orders are getting in the way of life, liberty, and property. So there must be some aspect to this that is unconstitutional. And who knows? I'm just bringing it up that if someone wanted to sue, it would be an interesting media story. So sue the government, that is, not me. And then I started thinking about other things too. So there was this YouTube video that someone sent me that had 5 million views. These two doctors were talking about, they're ER doctors, they were saying. And I don't know if it's true or not. I didn't even watch the whole video. But what was interesting to me was they were talking about how California specifically the economy should go back to work. So again, not talking about that at all. But then YouTube took down their video, so they were censored. And I think that is actually unconstitutional. Now, everyone argues, well, YouTube's a private company, but I don't think that matters because YouTube is a big enough platform. There was a case, a friend of mine, Ed Bennett, was the CEO of a company called Prodigy. I don't know if you remember Prodigy. It was a competitor to AOL in the 90s. And so Prodigy had a case where somebody sued them because there was hate speech. There was anti-Semitic or Nazi propaganda hate speech on Prodigy. So somebody sued Prodigy. And Prodigy's defense was, and they won the case, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, I think. Prodigy's defense was, hey, we don't moderate any of our comments at all. We do 0% moderation of the comments, so people have freedom of speech. We can't take down one thing without starting to moderate. And so I wonder, now that YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all these sites are moderating their platforms, I wonder if now they're breaking that older law from the 90s, the precedent that says you either moderate everything or you moderate nothing. And so I wonder if this will be, because there's been so much pulled down videos and posts and so on from all these platforms, I wonder if that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. The other thing I wanted to mention was, Texas is going to be reopening, I guess, Thursday, right? So Texas, the governor came out and said, this is whatever, I'm just going to go ahead and open. And he's going to open up all businesses, but in restaurants, you can only fill up, or any large gatherings, you can only fill up 25%. And so, I don't know, if you own a restaurant, I don't think you could stay in business if you're only seating 25% of the people. Restaurants make their money on the weekends when they're full. The rest of the week, they're only 25% full. Now, comedy clubs, I'd be more than happy if the comedy club I own is filled up just 25%. But other than that, I don't know if the Texas thing is going to work so well. So here's another thing I was thinking. What are ways right now or going past? So I already talked about another idea for the 30-day book challenge about how to make some money. And next week or later this week, I'll come up with another book challenge. I have a couple in store. But I also think it's very interesting right now to be a virtual assistant. So what is a virtual assistant? So let's say I was going to work for someone as a virtual assistant. It means they can contact me through text, maybe phone, maybe email, and we're in remote locations, and that person could say, I want to fly from LA to Hong Kong on this day. Do it. And I'll know their profile, like, they like to travel first class, they like to travel on the aisle, they like to have a car pick them up on both sides, they like this kind of hotel, and I would make a virtual assistant would make all the arrangements. But a virtual assistant also, the same CEO could call me. If I was the virtual assistant, the same CEO could call me and say, hey, I need more online content. And so I would say, no problem. I'll do 2 Instagram posts a day, 2 TikTok videos a day, a Facebook blog post, a blog post for your company's website, a LinkedIn post, and maybe some tweets or whatever. And so a virtual assistant does all these things and then update the website with whatever. So a virtual assistant can do all these things, and if you do, so here's again the spoken wheel approach. If you're a virtual assistant and you do lots of different activities, now you can write a book, how to make money as a virtual assistant. Then you could teach an online course, how to be a virtual assistant. You could hire virtual assistants yourself to do the work that you were going to do as a virtual assistant. So let's say the CEO wants to make travel arrangements to Hong Kong. Let's say the CEO is paying me $25 an hour. I can now outsource to a virtual assistant I have in India that I'm paying $1 an hour to actually make the travel arrangements. So and then I could hire other virtual assistants and create a whole virtual assistant business. So now, take it one step further. What about being a virtual concierge? So a concierge, what does that mean? So if let's say my dream in life is to meet Elton John. And so I say to a virtual concierge, I want to meet Elton John. Well, the virtual concierge will find maybe a charity that Elton John is going to be performing at and say to me, look, if you donate X number of dollars, you can meet Elton John. So, or let's say I want to go to Rayo's. So it's a hard to see. You can't make a reservation even a year in advance at Rayo's in Harlem in New York City. And so let's say I wanted to eat at Rayo's. I could call a virtual concierge and they will do it. Now, there are websites that could find hard to get seats in fancy restaurants. So I would as a concierge, I would consult sites like that. Or I'd find the common customers of that restaurant and see if there's something in common between the CEO I'm working for and the customers in that place. So again, virtual assistant, virtual concierge, you can make an enormous amount of money. Here's another way a virtual assistant can make money. Let's say I'm a virtual assistant, and let's say you're the CEO, and you hire me. You say, I need help. I need a virtual assistant for all my social media. I'll say to you, well, look, all the social media you do has to funnel into an email list. I'll set up your email list as well. And the CEO will be like, great, whatever you need. And so now I'm doing more services for the CEO, but now I'll use an email company like MailChimp or ConvertKit or Aweber or whatever, and I'll do an affiliate deal with them. So I'm getting 30 to 50% of the sale of their services to the CEO. So every service I do for the CEO, I can have an affiliate agreement with to make additional money from all the services he needs. So for instance, let's say the CEO needs a logo to be designed. I could find a logo designer, and the logo designer could charge $10,000. I'll charge the CEO $11,000, take $1,000 for me, while I'm also charging for my hourly services for the CEO. There's nothing wrong with that. That's called an affiliate deal. So, and you can even disclose that to the person you're working for. So people sometimes don't realize, even when you do something like being a virtual assistant, there's all sorts of additional ways to make money. There's always the spoke and wheel approach to make money any way you can. I have a podcast. So a podcast makes money through ads. But what if I also made money through special kinds of sponsorships? Like a sponsorship might be, hey, if you buy an ad on my podcast, I'll also go give a talk at your company. Or I might make money with affiliate deals. So when I read an ad, maybe MailChimp's my favorite email marketing company. I'll read an ad about MailChimp, but instead of MailChimp paying me for the ad, I'll do an affiliate deal with MailChimp. I could take a video of my podcast and put it on, pitch it as a TV show. Or I could take the transcripts of my podcast and segment them by category, and now I can make books. So for instance, I took all of the interviews I've done with billionaires and got the transcripts of every billionaire. I wrote an intro, I edited the transcripts, and I created this book, Think Like a Billionaire, which is just basically the interviews, the written and heavily edited with my intro as well. So I did a little bit of writing. I did like a month's worth of writing, and I wrote this book, Think Like a Billionaire. But most of the content was already created by my podcast. So finding different ways to slice and dice content is extremely valuable. I could also take some of those articles now that are chapters in Think Like Billionaire and maybe put them on Inc. magazine or Entrepreneur magazine. The top 10 ways, Ray Dalio makes money. Who knows? Whatever. By the way, I'm excited. I'm interviewing on Thursday Mark Cuban for the podcast, so excited about that. That'll come out on Monday, I think. We're going to push John McAfee till the Monday after so I can get the Mark Cuban podcast out. And anyway, I haven't even seen the questions. It's already 2:40. I haven't seen the questions. Jay, I'm going to click the link. Let's see what questions are there. Thoughts on writing a book with Scribe. I don't use anything fancy to write a book. I just use Google Docs to write books. So nothing fancy. Is that backdrop to give you a panoramic view? We're actually, my wife Robin and I, we're starting to do a morning news show where we analyze and give unbiased, real interpretations of all the headlines and interesting news of that day, and give a little humorous slant as well. So we're thinking of having this as the background for that, but we haven't been using it, so now it's just up there. Let's see. What's one of the coach matching sites? I don't know, but if you Google how do I find a coach, then you'll find it. What style of learner do you think you are? I can only learn things when I'm obsessed. So I could only learn about chess if I'm obsessed with chess. I can't learn how to fix a car because I'm not interested in cars. I can't learn Spanish because I'm not interested. I was married to a Spanish-speaking person for 5 years, and I still couldn't even learn Spanish. And my brother-in-law is French, and we started a business together, and I took French for 5 years in college and high school, and I still can't speak more than 3 or 4 words of French. So if I'm not interested in something, I can't do it. I do drink coffee daily. So I had on, I forget his name now. Maybe it's Sanjeev Chopra. Deepak Chopra's brother is, he's an MD. He's a professor of medicine at Harvard. And he wrote a book about the 5 most important things you need to know for your health. And he said something very interesting. Number 1 was coffee. And he said coffee has a ton of antioxidants in it. Like more antioxidants than even blueberries and blackberries and all that. So coffee I drink in the morning. I definitely do not drink coffee after noon because I want to be able to sleep at night. Oh, which reminds me, I wanted to talk about the podcast I had yesterday. It was with Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a professor of neuroscience at Stanford. And for the first time, I think I really understand the differences between dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all these neurochemicals that make you happier. I mean, usually when someone's depressed, it's because they don't have sufficient dopamine, or they don't have sufficient serotonin, or maybe they're too anxious, or whatever. So SSRIs like Prozac are for people who don't have enough serotonin, but often people have a hard time finding the right antidepressant because they don't know what kind of depression they have. Is it bipolar depression? Is it anxiety? Is it you don't have enough dopamine? Is it you don't have enough serotonin? But this guy, Dr. Huberman, or Professor Huberman, he gave me some tips. Like he said it's very important to have extra dopamine in the morning. And so he gave some tips. And if you don't mind, I'll give you some of the tips he gave me to boost your dopamine, which is like your happy chemical. So dopamine is that happiness you get when there's a new like on your Instagram post, or you feel rewarded for the work you did. It's a new like on your Facebook post, or maybe when I win a game of speed chess, I'll feel that boost in dopamine. And he made an interesting point. He said, look at 2 teams that are playing football with each other. The team that wins, they're jumping around, they're screaming, they have so much energy. And the team that loses, they all look dejected, and their shoulders are slumped, and they're tired. And dopamine has real physical effects on your energy and your enthusiasm, because the team that won got a huge boost in dopamine. So during this coronavirus, during this lockdown, it's very hard for us to get our usual dopamine. So that's one reason why people are starting to feel a little stressed. When you don't get enough dopamine, you start to feel stressed, anxious, maybe a little cranky. So he suggested several things. Some of them were not so obvious. One thing is, first thing you can, go outside and get some morning sunshine. I didn't know this. He said there are dopamine receptors on the tops of your eyes, and by having morning light come down, that gives you this early energy boost with dopamine. And it also resets your metabolic system so that it's easier for you to fall asleep at night. It's easier for you to wake up in the morning. It tells the body and the brain that this is morning, so then the body knows later that it's night. So he says get at least a few seconds of morning sunshine. Then he said, because there's a link between dopamine and adrenaline, do 5 minutes, 10 minutes of exercise. Maybe do some push-ups, maybe take a walk around the block. Just do that and you'll get your adrenaline going, and that will release more dopamine. And then he said drink a cup of coffee, that will release even more dopamine. But then, even most important, he said rather than just going on social media and randomly thumbing through Instagram posts, he said that's will release dopamine, but it's just too scattershot. It won't give you focus, it won't give you energy. He said you have to have a focused goal that's easy to achieve. So for instance, give yourself a goal every morning. I'm going to return 4 emails first thing in the morning. That will give you this dopamine boost and will start you on the day. Let me see if he said anything else, because it's all really interesting. I took notes. I hardly even take notes during podcasts, but I took notes during this one. Here we go. No, that wasn't it. Oh yeah, here we go. So he suggested, he said fasting, intermittent fasting. If you skip one meal, that will boost your dopamine, because anytime you anticipate something good, dopamine comes out, because dopamine gives you the energy to get that something that's good. So if you skip breakfast, so this guy, he told me he personally skips breakfast, because then your body starts to anticipate the next time you're going to eat, and that will boost dopamine. So I didn't know that at all. He also said 10 to 15 minutes of movement, get sunlight, pick a goal and a target, which I already said. And then he gave some supplement ideas, but he said consult your doctor. But he said nuts have this thing called L-tyrosine, Tyrosine, which you could even do as a supplement. And he recommend don't do the supplement directly, or if you do it, don't do it too much, because it'll be overkill, and you don't want to do overkill. He says don't take L-dopa, which directly makes, and he says don't take Adderall, L-dopa, or cocaine, because then your body will forget how to make dopamine, since those things make the dopamine for you. So don't do that. But L-tyrosine, he says, is a precursor to making dopamine, and if you take that, then you'll have this dopamine surge. But he said don't do it every day, and consult a doctor. I'm trying to think what else he suggested. And then he suggested some ways of creating serotonin. So dopamine is good for focus and energy in the morning, and then later on in the day, you kind of want to just wind down. He said serotonin is kind of like the here and now neurochemical. So it makes you more satisfied with where you are here and now. So you're not going towards a goal anymore. Now you're just pleasantly happy, and you feel content, which is a good way to be right before you go to sleep, for instance. You don't have all this extra energy. You're more just relaxed with where you are. So he said a good thing to do mentally when you're switching and he said all the high performance people he coaches can toggle between dopamine and serotonin states very quickly. So he says one way to toggle the serotonin is to take a step back from what you're doing and feel grateful for everything you have. Maybe feel grateful for the goals you completed this morning, or grateful that you're with your family during lockdown, or grateful you don't have coronavirus. Be grateful for what you have right now, the sort of be here now idea, and your serotonin will pick up. He also said that some complex carbs, rice, pasta, or whatever, not to overdo it, but carbs, don't eat them in the morning, because carbs release serotonin. So eat them later in the day, so it helps you to go to sleep. And again, you don't want to have bright lights later on in the day because bright lights over your head are associated with increasing dopamine, serotonin. Dim the lights, don't look at screens. You kind of want to relax. And he said also the precursor, the supplement you could take for serotonin is L-tryptophan, which is found in turkey, pastas, rices. So he does some carbs at night. He did say something interesting. No melatonin. Don't use melatonin to sleep. So he says melatonin, and I'm just quoting him, melatonin suppresses puberty. It's a hormone that suppresses puberty. And if you're a man and you take melatonin, it'll reduce testosterone. If you're a woman and you take melatonin, it'll reduce estrogen. So melatonin, do not take that. He also said chamomile tea is good for boosting serotonin. So anyway, that was a couple of dopamine and serotonin tips. That podcast is probably coming out next week. I'm going to look at Jay's questions again. How many hours do I read each day? When I didn't live in New York, I read for at least 3 hours a day. Now it's probably, because I read a lot for podcasts, and then I also research for my books, and I also read for enjoyment, but it's, in New York City, so distracting, it's probably down to 1 to 2 hours a day, unless I have a lot of podcasts coming up, and then I'll read lots of books. But in general, I probably now read only 1 or 2 hours a day. I wish I had time to read like 3 or 4 hours a day, but I don't. Now, someone asked a question which I've answered a million times. What is the best way to get the idea muscle going? And most of you will know the answer, and I don't have it on me, but you write an idea list. You write down 10 ideas a day. Not 3, not 4, not 1, 10. Every time when I hit 7, I start counting them over and over again. If I hit 10, and don't stop until you hit 10. So if you write 10 ideas a day, every day, you can't skip one day, I will guarantee you it will rewire your brain. Your brain will suddenly be wired to be creative nonstop. You will always be creative. Your creativity, you will have too many ideas to handle. So write down 10 ideas a day. It's so simple. I use a waiter's pad or I use my emails to do it. What's the best way we can help those struggling with stress and emotional and mental health during this time? Is a good question. So I just mentioned these things about dopamine and serotonin. So those techniques are good to help anybody with stress and emotional and mental health. But here's the thing. If it's not your job to cure someone's emotional health. Now, it's important, but a lot of times people are not going to listen to you. If I tell somebody I'm sad or I'm stressed, I just want someone to vent to. I don't really care about the advice they give me. How many times have you given advice to somebody and they just nod their heads, but they're not going to follow it? Even your best friends, they're not going to follow your advice. So, very important, don't be egotistical about giving advice. The most important thing you can do is listen to people. So, listening is if someone wants to vent, the service they're really asking from you is, can you listen to me? So you could just say, it's always good. People always like people who repeat what they said. So if I say I'm stressed, you can say, you're stressed. And just be silent. And then if you're silent, if you just repeat what they say and you're silent after that, they assume, probably correctly, hopefully correctly, that you're listening to them. And they'll say, yeah, I've got all these podcasts, I've got all these projects, and I've got to cook meals for my 12 kids or whatever. And then you could be like, oh, geez, you've got to cook for 12 kids? So again, you repeat what they say. It's like, yeah, which means I've got to go to the store, and one kid's a vegan, one kid can't eat carbs, one kid can't eat vegetables, I got to cook all these meals. And then you repeat it again. You say, are you kidding? You have to cook like 5 different types of, one of your kids can't eat vegetables? And then they'll keep going. So if you just show them that you're listening by repeating the last thing they said, and then you just be silent. Nobody likes silences in conversation. They will fill up that silence, and they'll feel better at the end that they had someone to vent to. And that the venting, I don't know if it's necessarily helpful, but maybe it will be helpful to them. Maybe while they're talking, they'll figure it out. For me, it's been very important during this lockdown that I try very hard to catch myself when I find myself complaining. It's so easy to complain, like, oh, I can't even go to the store, or I can't go to the dentist, or I can't mail this package, or blah blah blah, or I have too many things to do, and I can't get it all done. That's complaining. Complaining is draining. So I'm trying to do a complaining diet during this entire quarantine. And my wife could tell you whether it's working out or not. I don't know if it is, but I'm trying very hard. Do I drink coffee daily, or do I use any other form of caffeine? I drink coffee daily. That's it. What's your trick to get podcast guests open to talk about their vulnerability? So that's a great question. So it's not like a trick. Like, you have to first off, when I think about vulnerability, I think about freedom. So if I tell you everything that I feel vulnerable about, now I'm free to, I don't have to worry about these things. I don't have to worry about what you think of me. I already admit it. If I say, oh my gosh, I'm broke, or oh my gosh, I was so stupid and I went broke so many times, I'm buying freedom. I'm now free to talk about everything relating to going broke or making money or whatever, and you could take it or leave it because you know everything about me. So what I usually do to get someone to talk about their vulnerability is I'll confess some vulnerability of my own. So for instance, if someone tells me, oh my gosh, I was addicted to this, and this, and I want them to open up about it, I'll say, oh, it's horrible to be an addict. I've been addicted to X, Y, and Z as well. And then they'll be more comfortable opening up about it because they'll relate to me. It was particularly hard to do this when I had my HBO web show called 3 a.m. I was often interviewing drug dealers and prostitutes at 3 in the morning, and to find some common ground to relate to them was very difficult. But we're all human, and we all have problems in relationships. Like, if I was interviewing a prostitute, I would simply say, well, do you ever have a boyfriend? Or a husband? What does your husband think about what you do? Or does this stop you from having relationships with men? And then they start opening up about what happens to them, when they're having sex for money, and they talk about really personal things about how they feel about men afterwards. Let's see. What shows am I watching? I can't even remember what shows I'm watching. Oh, I just watched Unorthodox on Netflix. I watched The English Game on Netflix, and that was a great story. It was by Julian Fellows, who wrote Downton Abbey. And it was he has a classic story structure, which is there's somebody rich and there's somebody poor, and the setting is, England in the 1800s or early 1900s. And at first they hate each other because of class differences. And over the arc of the story, they get closer and closer. That is a classic Julian Fellows, Downton Abbey and the English Game story structure. And he does a good job of it. So what's a good biz for someone who has shiny object syndrome? So I suggested earlier looking into becoming a virtual concierge because, again, a concierge is different than a virtual assistant. A concierge gets you things that are hard to get. Like if you want a classic antique Rolex, a concierge will find that for you. They know the techniques to find that for you. If you want a seat at the hottest new restaurant in town, a concierge will get you that seat. If you want the highest end Tesla, a concierge will get you a Tesla, probably at a good price. So, and again, if you become a virtual concierge, not only will you make money doing that, but then you could write a book about it, you could teach a course about it, again, you could have a podcast about it. So it's a good way to make money, and there's lots of spokes that come out of it to make even more money. So I've used the services of a concierge before. I met Elton John because I used the services of a concierge, or I've met President Clinton because I used the services of a concierge. So, by the way, in neither case was it worth it, but I did it. It's one of the reasons why I would go broke occasionally. So, anyway, tomorrow, my idea list for today was virtual business ideas or business ideas you could do while in quarantine or while in lockdown, and I'll share some more of these business ideas tomorrow. I'll talk more about the books on my bookshelf, particularly the ones I haven't read, and maybe a few of the ones I have read. I'll talk about some online courses that I think are interesting, And again, more business ideas for you. And the best headline of the day. First off, I always go to cosmopolitan.com because unlike other websites, I'm gonna read a headline off of a news website. So this is a big famous news website. It says Sweden says its approach worked. Numbers suggest a different story. That is BS because Sweden has about 230 deaths per million people, and that's actually higher than the US, which is 151 deaths per million people, so you could argue Sweden was worse. But Sweden is better than almost 80% of the other European countries. So it's interesting to see why. You have to ask, why did Sweden not shut down at all and have okay results compared to countries that shut down completely? Does the virus care if you shut down? And I think the answer is we don't know, but the US took the approach, let's not take any chances. Sweden took the approach, let's go for herd immunity. It's just two different strategies, but this headline is BS. And instead, let's find a good headline. So cosmopolitan.com, they have the best headlines, and it's all, you're already going to cosmopolitan.com, so they're not going to lie to you anymore. Like, they've already convinced you to come to their website. So the top article, the top headline is the most living room friendly Pilates videos. Now that is much more useful than saying some BS comment about Sweden. So many people need exercise at home. So many people can't go to their Pilates class. So of course they'll be looking for the most living room friendly Pilates videos. Here's another one. The 45 best Disney movies ever. Okay, and that's an interesting, I'll click on that. I have an opinion. What's your favorite Disney movie? I'm going to try to think before I read this article. What's your favorite Disney movie? I think mine might be The Incredibles, although, no, I like the 1937 Snow White. I just thought the original, before computer animation, I thought the Snow White animation was so beautiful. So let's see. The best Disney movies, let's see. It's a gallery. Oh, I got to click 45 times. The Emperor's New Groove. I don't know if I believe that. I don't think that was it. Hercules. No, it must be starting with the worst. So let's go to number 45. That's probably the best. And they got Frozen, Bambi. Oh, no, I accidentally clicked away. Cinderella. Oh, I clicked away from the whole thing. Oh, wait, here we go. Oh, yeah. Cinderella, they say, is the best Disney movie ever. With that, I want you to know that I am going to save this in my IG stories on the live section, and I'm also going to upload this to YouTube probably this evening or first thing tomorrow morning. Thanks very much for coming to the IG Live, and I will see you tomorrow at 2 p.m.